Mike here at CBI Off-Road. Today we're going to be showing you how to install our bolt-on Gladiator rock sliders. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so we kind of have most of our stuff here laid out. So we can see that we're going to have some different brackets here. These are going to bolt onto the body, and they're actually labeled passenger and driver, and then 1 through 4 backwards. And then we have 2 of our brackets here that are going to bolt onto our body mounts. Our main skid plate for the lower part that is going to slide onto the body mount here. The brackets are going to bolt on here, and then we have our top plate, which is going to slide onto the top. We have some pieces that are going to bolt onto the top, a small plate that we're going to put on that's going to go under our CBI emblem, and we'll go ahead and start showing you the hardware and everything. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do before anything is we're going to put our little plate on here. It is cut out specifically for the CBI emblem, and this needs to go on before you basically do anything, just to make sure you remember to put this on, because once these are bolted in place, you're not going to be able to put this on. So you do have a couple small Allens and nuts that are going to hold these in place. So we'll go ahead and put those on real quick. All right, so once we got our little plate in, we do have these top plates, but these are going to go on after we get everything kind of situated in place on top. We'll go ahead and put all of our U-nuts in place, get these pushed on. You may need a hammer. Some of them are a little bit tight, but for the most part, they should be able to slide right on. And you'll hear them clip in place, so they're down all the way. All right, so as you can see, we already have our factory sliders off of there. They just mount to the body here. So we are going to reuse these holes here, and we are going to keep these 13mm bolts that were in the bottom here, because we're going to be reusing these. So let's go ahead and get our brackets so we can bolt them on. Again, these are labeled P1, so passenger 1. That's going to be the first one that's going to bolt up right here in place. Again, we're going to reuse that factory bolt. We're just going to work our way back. All right, so once we have these brackets just held in place, we're not tightened down, you're gonna get your 5/16 by 18 bolts that we send with them, with your washer, and then a serrated flange nut. We're just gonna go right back through these original holes that your original sliders went through. We're just gonna hand tighten those down for now. We're gonna repeat that on the other 3. All right, so once we got our bolts through here, I'm gonna go ahead and tighten up that factory bolt, and then we'll tighten up these. Again, this is just the factory 13. All right, so once the bottom factory bolts are tight, we can go ahead and tighten up our 5/16 bolts and get those nice and snug down. All right, so with our brackets in place, next thing we need to do is we're gonna loosen our body mount bolts. So one thing that we do want to do with the body mount bolts, if you are having trouble pulling them out, you may want to get like a torch of some sort and heat them up, because these do have Loctite on them, and you can end up stripping the bolts or even breaking it off inside of there. So we want to go ahead and make sure we have them nice and tight. Ours have been pulled out a few times already, so ours are going to come right out pretty easy. But again, we want to heat them up, get the Loctite loose so that they'll come out easily. All right, so next we're gonna go ahead and slide our brackets in place. The larger one with the 4 holes in it is gonna be our rear. It's gonna come down like this. So we're gonna slide it up there in place and just kind of leave it just hand tight. We don't need it to be tightened down all the way. All right, so now we have our front bracket here, and it's got the 3 holes in it. But one thing we want to pay attention to is these are left and right specific. So this one, it kind of has that angle going forward, and that's going to be for our passenger side. The driver's side is going to do the same thing. It's going to angle forward on the driver's side, so they are side specific. So we'll slide that into place, and we'll just tighten that up by hand. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and put our rear bracket in. It's one has the 4 holes. We do want to notice this has kind of a curve to it here, and the curve is going to be at the back because these are side specific again. So we're gonna go ahead and set this one up in here. Again, it just needs to be hand tight for now, and that's it. We can go ahead and leave that in place. All right, so we're getting ready to put our top plate on. So these are side specific, obviously, and you can kind of tell by this cutout here. This is the larger end is the back, and you can see the front kind of cuts in on this side, and that's going to be the front of it there. So, and again, these are our lower plates are going to be side specific. We again have the 4 bolts that match up to our plates, and then the 3 bolts match up to the front plates. So once we get that figured out, then we can go ahead and slide these on. All right, so we got ours slid up. We do have the 1 middle bolt that this is going to slide in to kind of hold that in place. I'm gonna tighten that up just a little bit. Again, we don't want it to be held in place yet, but because we still want to be able to adjust. Move that in place so we can still move it around a little bit. Then we'll get our top piece and we'll slide that in place. All right, so this is going to kind of slide on top of these, and the bottom piece is going to slide underneath. So this is going to be the outside piece. It's going to kind of clamp this piece here, and we're going to bolt onto these pieces there. All right, so now we can put our little top plates on here. They are kind of a little bit specific. This thinner edge here is going to face towards the body, so the longer one is going to be our front. And set that up in place. And then the rear one, you have these 2 holes here. Those are going to indicate towards the rear. And again, they're just going to sit right up here. And then we can go ahead and get our button heads and we can start bolting those down. All right, so you're going to have 8 of these 3/8 button heads on each side. So we're going to go ahead and they're going to go right into those C-nuts that we put in earlier on our other brackets. And we just want to do these hand tight again. We don't want everything tightened down quite yet. So we'll get these started, and then we can move on to the next set of bolts that we can go ahead and get started in before we can get the final product to get everything tightened down. All right, so next we're going to be installing our 3/8 carriage bolts, which are going to basically be taking these spots right across here, and then they're also going to be bolting our bottom plate to our brackets. So we'll go ahead and take these and push this in place, and they're just going to slide up in there, get them in, and then we can start the nut on the other side. All right, and so one tip for these end ones right here, because they're kind of a little bit trickier to get to, take the nut first and slide the nut up over the hole so where you can see it, and then take your carriage bolt and you can thread your carriage bolt into the nut on the inside, and it's not as hard. You don't have as much trouble trying to put your fingers in there and get the nut started on the inside. So on the middle ones that go across, there's actually a hole here just for sticking your hand in there, so we can get the nut back in there, and then we can take and put the bolt through. All right, so now that we have all of our carriage bolts in place, everything's in, so we can go ahead and start tightening things down. The first thing I'm going to start with is I'm actually going to start with these body mount bolts. We're going to go ahead and tighten those up, and then we'll move on to all the carriage bolts, and then we'll move on to our top bolts. All right, so we got our body mount bolts tight. So now we're gonna go ahead and tighten all the nuts on the back side of all of our carriage bolts. It's gonna be a 9/16 or a 14 millimeter, whichever one you got access to. And go ahead, tighten all those through there, and you can get to the ones through the holes on the sides. And once we get those tight, then we'll move on to our top plates. Yeah. All right, so now that we have all of our carriage bolts all tightened up, our body mounts are tight, we can go ahead and finish off our little top plates here with our Allens, and we can go ahead and tighten those. We just have regular Allen key. It does help if you have one of the little rounded ones just to get them started down in there, but then once they're tight, then you can go ahead and just tighten them up. All right, so that takes care of the install of our CBI Off-Road Gladiator rock sliders. If you guys have any questions or concerns, you can give us a call here at CBI Off-Road or email us. Thanks.